Juneteenth is a very important holiday because it is a time when all of the states in the Union, all of the slaves were freed in the Union. Uh, Juneteenth happened on June 19th, and it happened a couple of years after the Emancipation Proclamation, and a couple of months after the very end of the Civil War. And it took that long for all of the slaves to be freed, in particularly in the great state of Texas. I hope there are no. I hope if you're a Texan, you know this story. But you probably, for us to understand Juneteenth, we probably need to understand a little bit more about Texas. And now we need I think that should be a bachelor's degree, understanding Texas, for many reasons. But respect to this, I read a book preparing for today by an Ed Gordon read, and it's called On Juneteenth, and it's super tiny and it's on ebook. Please catch it. It's a great book. And she explains that Texas is quite an interesting place because when when the first Americans began to establish themselves in Texas, they were farmers, and they understood that in order for them to become wealthy people, I guess that was part of the American dream. They needed slavery. They needed people to work the land and to work the land in the amounts of land that they were looking for. Now, at that time, Texas was part of Mexico, and Mexico, they didn't like slavery. So the Texans, when they saw that slavery or their way of life was being threatened because Mexico didn't want to abolish slavery in all of its states, that's when Texas became its own republic, and he did that for I think it was a couple of years, and then he joined the Union. When the Civil War broke, of course, they aligned with the South because, again, for Texans, slavery was their way of life. It was important, so white males who own land could continue to gain wealth. And once slavery was abolished, they continue to ingrain in their society, in their culture, the idea that Black Americans, the only way that Black Americans could exist was under the oppression of slavery. And I know that we know that this is not just something that happened in Texas, but it is part of an unfortunate part of the fiber of who we are as Americans. Slavery, through slavery, it is that we chose to build this country. And still to this day, even though I don't know anyone, and I truly don't know anyone that says, I think slavery was a good idea. But still, we do believe that in order for some of us to succeed, we need to push other people down. And in order to get to the top, we need to push people down. And in that, we, of course, we see it more clearly in racism. And not just racism, but also all of the different structures that we have built as a society that continue to oppress people and put people down. Annette Gordon Reed, she asked a question which is kind of like one of those duh questions, but somehow it just caught my imagination. And the question was, can we do better than this? And the question is, can we do that better? Yes, of course we can do better. But then the question comes, do we want to do better than the way in which we're built as a society? That is a similar question that the Apostle Paul writes in Galatians. Now, if you have written an angry letter, one of those letters that you're writing in pencil, and the tip of the pencil breaks several times because you are like really intent on it. Or maybe, what am I talking? Who knows what a pencil is? Or we're typing, and we're typing really hard, and everyone can see the keystrokes that we are hitting. Just imagine that Paul was writing with that same emotion. He started the church in Galatia, or the churches in Galatia, with the idea that what they knew as the law was no longer current. The way in which we used to think about each other, it is not relevant anymore. Instead, there is a different way of life, a different set of rules, so to speak, a different understanding and goal of what and who we should become, and that is that's Christ. That is through what he says, the law of Christ. But the Galatians, they heard him the first time, and then they went on and to do their own thing, and they saw that society at large, it was a caste type of society, that there were people who were on top, people who were at the bottom, that people were being differentiated by ethnicity, or treated and casted in different places in society by ethnicity, or by social class, or by gender. And Paul was outraged at this thing that they were doing. So actually, chapter 3 begins by Paul saying, "You foolish Galatians." I mean, right? What a way to address people that you want to change. Usually we're thinking, maybe if we try to be nice, that they'll change. No, but Paul was like, no, you guys, you need to stop. You foolish Galatians, who has taught you wrong? And when he comes here to the end of the chapter, he lays it down. And he says, listen, you have divisions between ethnic divisions between Jews and Gentiles, and in this life that we have chosen to live, that doesn't exist. Those divisions don't exist anymore. There are just divisions of classes, and that's why there are slaves and frees. And Paul says, that may be outside of our community, but for us, there's no distinction. There were distinctions about gender, and we know those distinctions well, as also that the male was more important than the female, and Paul says that doesn't exist. Might exist outside of our walls, outside of our community, but in our community, those distinctions do not exist. Actually, we can do better than that, he says. We can do better than that because in the kingdom of God, we're all the same. We're all the same. And we ought to be treating each other the same. We ought to be even further, he says elsewhere, we ought to be loving each other the same. And that is how we can do better. Now the question is, do we want to do better? Do we want to exercise that love that makes us equal to one another? And we know that even in our society, in our place of being here, as Nebraskans, as Midwesterners, as people, members, citizens of the United States, we see that there are drastic differences in society. We see that there is huge differences related to wealth. So wealthy people, by some reason, we like them better. So wealthy people can afford better health care. And people who are not as wealthy, they struggle with health care. Wealthy people, they can also purchase and increase their wealth by purchasing property. and people that are not as wealthy, that they cannot do that. Um, and in that way, we have created these divisions in our society. Um, into those things, the law of Christ, this way of being that we have committed to, um, says no, says no to those things. We have seen the same in the workplace. We know that for the same job, men earn more than women, and white people earn more than folks of color, um, and that is the way that things are outside. But in this commitment that we have made as people of faith, we to that we say no. You know that there is a big thing here in Nebraska that we need to build more jails, more prisons, and because we cannot, there's not enough space for the folks that break the law. But when we look at the prisons, we see that the ethnic breakout of by ethnic groups, we know that is not representative of the society at large, which means that people of color, they are incarcerated at bigger rates, and that is an injustice. Another sign of how our cultures have built systems to put down folks so others can rise up. And to that, maybe outside these walls, it's the way that it is. But for us as people of faith, as people who have committed to a different way of life, we have to say no. And we march and we write letters and we do all sort of things to change the laws, and that is very important. And those are things that we need to do. But it's also true, or I shouldn't say but, and it's also true that we cannot legislate love. We cannot make people feel affection towards someone else. That is something that we need to want to do. And this Juneteenth, I think the question that the scriptures ask me, that the scriptures ask us is, do we want to do better? How are we sharing God's love with others? How are we sharing our love with others? Do we have friends that are outside of our ethnic group? Are there people that we truly love who are outside our ethnic groups, or are people that we truly love that are outside of our financial or socioeconomic level, state? Are there people that we love? Are there people that we love that are of a different gender than ours? Are we accepting? Are we welcoming? Are we truly living by that commitment that we have made as people of faith? And I think, hello, welcome, you can come in. No? Okay. This way. Almost done. So the idea here is that, friends, we need to make that commitment. If we want to be true troublemakers, yes, we need to keep being politically active, but we have to be lovingly active. And I think that I truly believe in the depths of my soul that the more we love, the more the world will change. Our world will change, and the world at large will change. So that's an odd thing to end with. To be a good troublemaker, we need to love. But I don't think in this world there is more trouble, or nothing causes more trouble than true love for all. Amen.